Hi, everybody. We are back with another episode of the Educator Wellness Revolution podcast. Woo! And we're super excited about our guest that is with us today. Chiara Monticelli is a middle school teacher at Hardy Middle School in DC, and she is an Italian teacher. She is an accomplished teacher. I'll let her share a little bit more about that. And she's also a wonderful human being who is teaching other educators about self-care and wellness and what that means. So we're very happy to have you here, Chiara.
Thank you. I'm very happy and honored to be here. Very grateful, Gracie and Scott.
Well, we would like to start just by hearing a little bit more of your story as an educator who cares about self-care. And so how did you really discover the importance of self-care to be able to continue your teaching profession?
I would say it started during the pandemic. The pandemic was a very difficult time for teachers, of course, well known. And the fact that it was so hard to relate with my students because of the barrier of the virtual learning pushed me to try and find new ways to interact and ways to reinvent myself. And yet at the same time, because of what was going on in the world, I was also developing a lot of anxiety that rippled into my work. I was feeling very unhappy about not being able to see the faces of my students, because unless they chose to turn on their camera, I wouldn't see them. And sometimes it felt very much like talking to a void. And I felt that void in my heart as well, because something that really gives me energy and happiness about my job is being with my students. I mean, it's the most important thing for me. Yeah. And so not being able to be with them in person and everything that was going on with the pandemic and here in DC with the attacks on the Capitol put me in a position of anxiety. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, and I was feeling that I wasn't serving my students well. And I, between drowning and burning out and rising to the occasion, I decided to rise to the occasion. And so I contacted you, Gracie, because you facilitated meeting at my children's school. And I started the self-care journey with you because I was feeling that between giving to my students and giving to my own children, being present as a mother during the pandemic was really took everything that I had out of me. And I had to be a positive presence for my students during online learning. And it wasn't easy because I wasn't feeling positive, but I still had to show up and be there and try to be present with them because they needed that. But I also needed it for myself. And so I needed to find a place where I could get it for myself. And since I wasn't getting it from my students, I realized if I want to find that energy from within, I really have to sit through the uncomfortable journey of self-discovery and do it both personally and professionally. Because
Gary, you raised something so interesting that I think it's been totally undercovered about the effect of the pandemic on teachers, which is the feeling of not being with the students in person. I mean, there's been a lot of focus on the virtual in a lot of different ways, but one of the things I feel like was a really strong impact was teachers get their energy by being with the students and feeding off their energy, and that's kind of what propels you to keep doing it every day. And so the draining of energy by not being with them and the void that the computer could produce, I think teachers all felt that really deeply. You said you decided at some point to kind of go on this self-care journey. You decided to come out on the side of stepping up, to the occasion. Was that a singular moment for you? Was there something that happened that propelled that decision? Was the accumulation of a lot of things?
I would say both. So the summer of 2020, that's when I really started hitting a wall, because I feel that up until May, when we were virtual and we were showing up, as teachers, we're very good at suppressing what we need because we're serving a greater purpose of being present with our students. And so I was suppressing those uncomfortable feelings, the fear, the anxiety. And then in the summer, when I didn't have anyone to take care of, it came out. And I started having insomnia, which is something very new for me. Mild anxiety, and so I took some steps over the summer to overcome these difficulties, but I felt that in that moment that was a signal of, okay, you need to attend to yourself.
Yeah.
Because both of my kids were okay. We were vacationing at my mother-in-law's place, and I couldn't go back to Italy. I couldn't see my family. Like the social contacts were very, very limited. I just felt like that was the moment where everything sort of came up to me. And I was lucky enough because I had signed up for a training with a group called Organic World Language, that is a very innovative group about pedagogy. I teach in a deskless and chairless classroom.
Yes.
And a lot of their focus of the OWL group is, of course, the whole child, but it's also the whole teacher. And so one of the things that they were really encouraging us to do was to take care of ourselves. Yeah. and find ways to take care of ourselves. And during that training, it was like the very first month of school, I thought about Gracie, and I reached out probably like a couple of months afterwards. I think right before actually January 5th.
I remember that. Well, and I'm thinking about how great and awesome, and I really want to applaud you for like feeling all those feelings and then doing something about it, because I think that people get really stuck in the feelings, and like, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling this, and then like we get kind of paralyzed to be like, what can I do next, or how do I do it? Because it can feel so big in those moments of like, well, how do I focus on my wellness, and what are the tangible steps? And I know that you like to teach about something called human giver syndrome, and I'm curious, like, how this, first, can you define what human giver syndrome is? And then I'm wondering how, like, for teachers in particular, how this like idea of being a giver all the time can get in the way of actually taking action to make self-care change for yourself.
Yes. Well, I mean, you said it, the human giver syndrome is basically what us teachers and parents suffer from, which is like, we keep giving to others to the point, like maybe initially it makes us feel good about ourselves, but then we forget that it's also, we need to take to nurture ourselves from the people that we're giving to. And it becomes a syndrome where we basically, to the point of where we give to the point of depleting ourselves completely, and we don't have any more to give. And I see that all the time at schools, like teachers that work insane hours, like they come at school at 7 a.m. and they leave at 6 p.m. Teachers that have children and families like me, or elderly parents that they need to take care of. Like, it's a constant giving to others, and we burn out because there's no one that tells us, you need to stop, you need to take care of your needs, because if you don't take care of your needs, no one will. And what I appreciated from the journey that we did together, Gracie, was that I found what my needs really were, because I thought that my self-care needs where, maybe I can get a massage once in a while or get my nails done once in a while. Well, that was more of indulgence in some ways, like, because the intention was not really to do deep self-care, but it was more surface, temporary relief.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I always want to say that the nails are really nice and the massages are nice, but if you're not doing the deeper, like listening to yourself, like I really do think it's like you have to like recognize, one, that you have needs, that you can't just give and give and give, that you have boundaries, that you like have places where you have to stop and take care of yourself, and then to like have the skills to tune in, to be like, what am I feeling? What do I need? Like, how do I, and to like have some practices that give you energy back. And that can sound really simple, but again, in those moments where we're overwhelmed or anxious, like it can just feel so hard to listen to ourselves.
Yeah, I think a key word is intention. Like, if my intention is to really take a moment and pause and nurture myself through a massage or a cup of hot tea or a sip of water or getting my nails done, then that's true. That's real self-care, because I'm basically taking the time to be with myself rather than doing something because it's what society tells me that as, if I want to appear beautiful, then I need to get my nails done.
Yeah, and there's just so much of, even finding the space to do that level of self-care where you're taking care of yourself is really hard, right? For teachers in their day, let alone teachers who are parents. I'm curious how that just like, how do you feel like the two compound upon each other, right? As someone who was a teacher and a parent at the same time, and we lose a lot of teachers who become parents, right? Because they're in some ways doing double of, right, all the things you just said, the giving, but also their time is, right, even more challenging, and making space for themselves is even more challenging. So yeah, I'm just curious how you feel like that compounds things, but also, if there's some remedy in it too, in the double role.
Thank you. Yes, that's a great question. I was very fortunate. I was very privileged that when I became a mother, I was able to take a part-time position, and I was able to hold on to that part-time position until 2 years ago. So I had the time. I might not have had the same financial availability that I have now that I'm working full-time, but I had the time because I decided to make the choice to work part-time.
And you were able to do that at your school?
Yes. So the principal that hired me at DCPS in 2012 offered me the part-time position, and I had just given birth to my first child. So principals after her asked me pretty much every year if I wanted to go full-time, and I kept pushing back, and being a teacher that is very responsive and very active in the school, despite my part-time position, I was able to keep that going. And then when my daughter, my second, turned 6, my principal asked me if I were ready, if I was ready to go to full-time, and I was. So now that I am full-time, how do I juggle still being a parent? Of course, my children are no longer young, very young. But I have no family members nearby because my family is in Italy. My mother-in-law is 91, so she can't really help us. My husband is wonderful. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without him. That's why anytime I have won an award for my profession, I've always thanked him, because he has really stepped up to the role of taking care of some of the things that I used to do when I was working part-time. And
Yeah.
so now I'm able to do these things.
Just the fact that you were able to have that schedule for some time is amazing. It's one of the things we're advocating for a lot now, for that kind of job flexibility, especially for new parents, and want to see more of that, just to give yourself the space and to do it even within a system that can be bureaucratic, within your own space with your own principal, to be able to work that out to give you the space you needed at that point in life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it wasn't always financially very feasible. But it was honestly the best choice, because working and working part-time was not exactly easy all the time, because sometimes I felt like I was working a full-time load on a part-time salary. But I did have the flexibility to leave school. Like, I worked from 8 until 12. And
Yeah.
so at 12, I was done. I could go home, take care of what needed to be done, including some self-care practices. So I would say the time flexibility, but then sometimes the work would catch up with me and I had to put a couple of days of full-time work.
I've always really admired and listening to you talk about your experience of being a DCPS teacher, of the ways that I think you found a lot of creativity in order to be able to work within a system that has a lot of constraints, to make it more workable for you. And some of that I know is like the way that you evaluate your students, the way that you set up your classrooms. I'd like to just hear more about how you frame that for yourself, to be able to, to insert yourself into a position where I think a lot of people don't feel like there's a lot of room to do things differently.
Well, I mean, I know this is funny, but I'm not great at following rules. And I think that's why, in some ways, I enjoyed my part-time. It was because, like, I had to follow the rules from 8 to 12, and then I was done. So because of that, when I decided to take the full-time, I needed something that would help me, in some ways, take the structure off. And I've always been a very untraditional teacher. I prioritize relationship with my students always, even before starting the self-care journey, even before my training with organic world language. But I feel that with organic world language, what that training has given me is really that freedom within the structure of using all of my resources to take down some walls and some of the structures. So starting with the physical structures of the desks and chairs. Why do we need the desks and chairs in the classroom? And I realized, like, I really don't need the desks and chairs, because I want to stand up and, play games with my students, have fun. In my particular subject area, I'm an Italian teacher. We do, the classroom environment is immersive, so it's 100% in Italian. And the physical aspect of the pedagogy in the target language is essential to build that vocabulary at the beginning. So, like, we need to move around, we need to be able to mimic things that we want to say to build meaning, and so that you can get language. So that's one of the things, like, really taking down the physical barrier. I had a very supportive administration that was, when I asked my principal if I could get rid of the desks and chairs, he was absolutely on board. Not only that, but he gave me another classroom that I'm happy to show you if you want, by the way, that has no desks and chairs. That only was, it was an old music classroom. that has carpet on the floor. And so he was so supportive, Mr. Cook, my old principal, and he saw my vision and embraced it and was always very supportive. So about the students grading, also that's something that we talked together as well with the administration, because I wanted to do a proficiency-based grading rather than performance. The world language world is very advanced in terms of pedagogy and how we grade the skills that the students have to show at each level. So there is a lot of support from the world language research as well. So it was very easy for me to bring that to my principal, because I was backed up by a lot of studies and researches. And it's been revolutionary as well, like as much as the desks and chairs. Like the students no longer feel threatened. They want to take risks. They feel safe in my class because they know that as long as they do their best, which I know it sounds rhetorical, but it's real. I was just talking to my students about that. I was giving them a test back, and I said, does an A look the same for you and the two people sitting next to you? And they said no, because they have different brains, and some students already have achieved this much, and some students are here and some students are here.
Well, it's really, what's really interesting is what you're doing for your students is in some way what you need your principals, right, to do for you, so that you can be bold enough, right, to do things that are going to succeed or are going to work. I mean, I think that's a lot of what we're trying to get at. I mean, with in each case you're talking about, whether it's the configuration of the room or your pedagogical approach to language teaching, you've been able to take a risk with a little bit of your own chutzpah and a little bit of the principal's willingness and the principal's openness to it. Doing your research, coming prepared to make your case and make your proposal for why this way is going to work, but also being given the flexibility, as long as the end, right, is there, they can see what you're going to accomplish with it. And then you're giving that same agency to the students, right, which is like, if they're putting in the effort, they're doing the right thing, you're giving them flexibility in how they get there too. And I think it just speaks to such an important lesson about education, which is that we think about our teachers and what the best practices is for letting them use their professional authority to teach the way they know how to teach, the same way that we give multiple avenues and paths for students when we're at our best, right? To make sure we're doing that on both sides.
Absolutely. Yes. That's exactly what it is. Like I asked for something that I was ready to give to my students, that I think it is what ultimately the whole child pedagogy is about. It's being able for them to discover who they are, and I can, as the teacher, facilitate that. So, which is what I wanted from my principal, to discover who I am as a teacher, what I'm capable of.
And I think this is an appropriate moment to brag on you, Chiara, can you talk about some of the awards that you've won over the past couple of years, just to show that this is not airy-fairy stuff, that it actually has some results too?
Yes. So at the end of 2020, 2021, I'm sorry, I was awarded with the World Language Teacher of the Year. Before that, I also received the Copeland Global Programs Award, which is also given by the Global Office of DCPS, while the World Language Teacher of the Year Award is given by the World Language Program of DCPS. And last year, I was among the finalists for the Standing Ovation Teacher of the Year DCPS Award. And I also got an award from the Italian Embassy as cultural for the for the contributions. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the word in Italian and it's hard to translate. For contributions, actually, I have it right here. For contributions in teaching and promoting the Italian language. This is my most recent.
Beautiful award. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. And I know that you do not do it for the awards, but I want to just point out that I'd love to hear you speak about perfectionism, because I think that, you know, a lot of us out there, you want to do your best, you want to be the best teacher you can be, you want to be recognized. And I think the way that a lot of us approach it is like, I have to work really hard and do it this way and kind of ace the system. But I see you kind of actually doing your best by like looking at your perfectionism and working with that. So can you speak a little bit about perfectionism and teaching and how you've learned how to work with that to be the teacher that you are?
Yes, that's a huge one. That's a huge one. Yeah, I mean, before before the pandemic, I was so convinced that to be a really good teacher, I had to have my desks needed to be all cleaned, my lesson plans needed to be perfect. And I would always get angry at myself for grading things late, for not planning well enough, for detailed enough. So I always thought, I need to get more, I need to get more. And to see that instead, when I decided like, no, this is just not who I am. I am not the magazine, a beautiful desk, clean type of teacher. I'm a messy teacher, but you know, as a way of truly accepting myself rather than going at myself. And I think that, though, in some ways it's also the system with all the demands that they put on us. Like, for example, in DCPS, we get evaluated with impact, and there are all those essential practices. And if you look at everything that they say, like, what I thought at the beginning was like, okay, I need to have all the lesson plans and the objectives and the standards and the grading done. And instead, it's like within those essential practices, there is some flexibility. Of course, it also depends on the administration that evaluates you, how much in details they want to go about each one of these practices. But in general, I've been very fortunate that my administration that has evaluated me really understood the value of what I've been trying to do in the last 2 years. And so last year I scored a 4 on impact, which is like, I never received a 4 on impact. And so it's kind of counterintuitive to think that when I decided to embrace my imperfection, that's when I started.
I love that though, because I mean, that's another thing, right? Where it's like, you know, for like, we think about like how we test students and things, right? And you know, you can just prepare them the standard way you're supposed to prepare them. This is what the questions look like on the test, and let's get ready for it, and then that's the way you're going to pass. But there's a lot of research that actually, if you embrace like their way of learning, if you do things differently in ways that engage them, that ultimately getting them engaged in learning, right, is gonna in the end, it's gonna improve that outcome, right? You don't have to walk a straight line to the thing you see at the end, right? So
no, exactly, because there are so many ways to get to the end result. You know, like there are so many ways to resolve a math problem or to write a history page, because there are so many points of view. So I feel that there is a dichotomy between, you know, what society tells us about who we should be and how we should act as teachers, as students, and who we really are. You know, and and what we really want to accomplish with our students as well. Like for me, the relationship is my goal. The academic is, of course, part of it, and my subject matter, I love it. It's my language, it's my culture. But my goal is to build a relationship with my students, build community, and help them discover who they can be through my subject matter, rather than, taking the standards of the subject and saying, this is how you should be, and this is who you are, and you are not good because you're not like this. So like, okay, this is what the whatever standard says you should know by the end of this time frame, and however you get there, it's in your own way. And so breaking up of that perfectionism, that standard, it gives so much freedom. And as I said, my students are enjoying the classroom to new levels, to the point, like for me, the biggest accomplishment is when the siblings want to come, because it means that the kids have spoken well and the families have talked. Like I also love to get to know the families of my students. It's a special journey. Sorry, I know it was a little.
It's perfect. It's imperfectly perfect. It's so good that I feel a lot of inspiration and life in what you're sharing. And I kind of like, when we talk about this educator wellness revolution, I'm like, this feels like the revolution. What you're talking about is like, how do we break out of the systems that really aren't serving anybody, so people can, become more whole human beings and support each other and really learn and grow. And so I'd love to close this conversation by, like, if there is a teacher out there right now who's feeling maybe somewhere between drowning and burned out, like you were saying, but it feels like some spark of inspiration in what you're saying, like what advice or what would you say to this teacher who is just really trying to like reclaim their love of teaching and like stay in the profession because they love it, but they're feeling really stressed?
Like as a short-term solution, I would say take those sick days. Like if you're feeling burnout, it means that it's probably you need to take a break. Like if your heart is demanding that, like you take a pause, because sometimes we do need a pause. We need to gain some perspective. And during that time, don't binge watch Netflix or do it for maybe a day. But like, for me, a great source of inspiration is always to talk to my colleagues, to really reach out to my colleagues too, to share, don't keep your story on what's going on for yourself, but to share it with your family, with your colleagues, if you trust them. If possible, if you have a mentor, to find a community of like-minded teachers. That was for me. Was to find, it was really a community of like-minded teachers that wanted to do things differently. Because there is so much support, and at the same time, if you're the only one in your school like me that wants to do things differently, you need someone else that tells you, like, keep going, you're doing the right thing. And like, reaching out to Empower Ed, for example, that's a great community of like-minded teachers. And maybe finding PLC communities where you can exchange your opinions, if you feel that there is, like me, you experienced anxiety. I also have a therapist, so finding some support there as well. That's very important, but we really can't afford to lose motivated teachers. So we need to, as Brene Brown says, you know, we need to own our own history. You know, we need to take it, and knowing that we're not alone. We all experience, even teachers that have won awards or that are successful, that we all experience burnout at some point, that we all feel depleted, and to remember to replenish ourselves as a practice, as a daily practice, even if it sounds daunting, but it's not, because it's really nurturing yourself. So, you know, you should treat yourself as the parent of yourself, and so nurture yourself.
Yes.
Love that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chiara Monticelli, Hardy Middle School Italian teacher extraordinaire.
Thanks, Chiara.
No, thank you guys. I
I
appreciated our conversation.
Me too. And, you know, just to remember anyone who's listening out there that just these conversations themselves, I hope they do feel like self-care to you, because it is a chance to really talk about the things that matter, to talk about the things that get in the way of our wellness, to be honest. And that, so just whatever you are feeling, spark of inspiration, like, you know, explore that and know that you can, you know, come back here and keep sharing, because we have to do this together. As Chiara said, this is a community. So thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Chiara.
Bye.